Let's give Stripe a test call. The reason I'm doing this is I want to see how the API responds, what data I get back. I also want to see how long it takes. So for this, I'm going to actually create a customer. So here is the API documentation for doing exactly that. Stripe.customers.create. As I mentioned, I can copy and paste that code right there and drop it directly in a file. And it's likely to work except for this part right here, the source. What that is a token. And the way Stripe works is it gives you a JavaScript library. So on checkout, when someone gives you a credit card, that credit card information does not go to your server, it goes to theirs. That helps keep you PCI compliant. And what you get back from that call is a token. That's this value right here. And you use that token to represent that credit card. Back on our server, we can simply call create customer and pass that token along. Stripe will know what to do with it. It'll attach the credit card to the customer and off you go. So I'm going to copy and paste this code. But I have a problem. I'm not working with a Stripe client library, not just yet. So I'll need to do something different. Here, I'm just going to create a stripe.js call. This is going to be a file that I call directly using Node. Here, and you can see that I just copy and pasted the API documentation. And as I mentioned, they drop my information right into the documentation. So I can just copy and paste it. So for description, I'm going to put in test user. And then instead of having source, I'm going to create a plan. I'm also going to send along an email. The final thing I need to do is, since I don't have access to a token, I need to pass some card details. Stripe doesn't force you to use their token system. You can pass along the card if you like. Here it just needs a name, a number, and I'm using a test key 41111, etc. And then I'll pass in an expiration month and an expiration year as integers. This code right here will work just fine, and it will do a number of things. It'll create a customer and store this credit card with that customer. It'll then create a subscription for the customer using this credit card, and it'll set up recurring billing, all with this small API call. Now, as slick as this really isn't the real world. This isn't what you're probably going to do. Instead, what you're probably going to do is use Stripe Checkout. That's what you see on the right side. This is a little JavaScript tool that will actually pop up the form that you see here. This is called Stripe Checkout, and it actually can capture a whole bunch of information, not just email and credit card and so on. You can actually tell it to capture address information. It's really, really neat. I've used it at TechPub for a very long time. I love Stripe Checkout. It removes a lot of stuff that I have to think about. Anyway, when it's done, it'll give you a token. That's the source down below. So you'll probably be using the code or something awfully close to it that you see here on the right side. Okay, well, let's jump back to our test call code. And there you are. The last thing I need to do is make sure that I have Stripe installed. And the Stripe people are good enough to provide us with a client library for Node that is really easy to use. In fact, that is the code that I copied and pasted. You can see all the other API code for different languages up at the API documentation. So let's log both things out to the screen, an error and the customer that is returned from this call. Oops, looks like I forgot a comma, and boom! Yeah, that was pretty quick. So when we made this call, we used our test key, and to confirm that, we want to look at live mode, and we can see live mode is false here. So we are bouncing off their test server. That's good to know. It gave us back a customer ID, that is a test customer ID, and it gave us back a bunch of information down below that we can use to interrogate the API backend if we want later on. Refreshing, here we see test@test.com. That is the customer that we just created. As I mentioned before, when you're doing integration tests, it's a good idea to go and, of course, check to make sure that everything is as you expect it to be back here in the Stripe test dashboard. Now we know it's test because the toggle on the top left says test. That's good to know. Well, what I really came here for was this response data, and I can use this when I start stubbing things with Sinon. What I really want to do is I want to have a valid response come back. I would like to stub using something that exactly comes from Stripe, not something I've made up myself. So I'll just pop it right here in my helpers. So I'll say good Stripe response, and I'll return back the response that I just got from Stripe just by copying and pasting it, dropping it straight in. You might be wondering why you're putting this in a function. The reason is that I want to have some args be able to be sent in here. So I could send in a plan. I'll just default it to commander, however, and we're good to go. I managed to talk to Stripe. I have some good data to use now in my tests. Let's keep rolling.